Everyone thinks they know the story of how the walls of Jericho came crashing down. We know about the trumpets, the marching, and the mighty shout that supposedly turned an impregnable fortress into a pile of rubble. But what if I told you the story you think you know is missing the most important part? What if the fate of the city wasn't decided by that final shout, but was sealed weeks earlier by a secret promise? This is the story of how a hidden deal, made between two spies and a woman with everything to lose, determined who would live and who would die when the walls finally fell. For 40 long years, the nation of Israel had wandered the desert, a people without a home, clinging to a divine promise of a land they could call their own. Now they stood at its very edge. Their legendary leader, Moses, was gone, and command had passed to his successor, Joshua. Before them flowed the Jordan River, and just beyond it, shimmering in the heat, stood their first and greatest obstacle, the city of Jericho. Jericho wasn't just a city, it was a legend, a fortress so famous its very name inspired fear across Canaan. Its defenses were a marvel of ancient engineering, a double ring fortification considered unbreakable. Archaeologists have found evidence of a massive stone retaining wall, topped by a thick mud brick wall rising even higher. The city was on high alert, its gates sealed shut, basically daring any enemy to even think about an assault. For the Israelites, a nomadic people with no siege engines and little experience in conventional warfare, the task looked impossible. All of that weight fell squarely on Joshua's shoulders. The fate of his entire nation rested on this first battle. A victory here would be a sign from God. A defeat would be a catastrophe. Trusting the guidance that had brought them this far, Joshua made a critical decision. He wouldn't order a frontal assault, not yet. First, he needed intel. He needed eyes inside that fortress. So he secretly summoned two of his most trusted men. Their mission was perilous, bordering on suicidal. Get inside the lockdown city of Jericho, figure out its defenses and the morale of its people, and most importantly, get back alive. As the two spies slipped away from the Israelite camp, they were more than just scouts. They were the first move in a divine chess match, walking unknowingly toward a destiny that would be shaped in the most unlikely of places. The spies slipped into Jericho like ghosts, moving through tense, crowded streets where every shadow felt like an enemy. They desperately needed a place to disappear, somewhere they could gather information without the city guard catching on. Their search led them to a house unlike any other, one built directly into the city's formidable outer wall. It was the home of a woman named Rahab. The scriptures identify Rahab with a single blunt label. She was a prostitute. In a society built on honor and patriarchy, this put her on the lowest possible rung of the social ladder. She was a woman on the margins, viewed with a mix of contempt and necessity by the very people of her city. But ironically, her home, often visited by travelers, provided the perfect cover. Who would ever suspect foreign spies were hiding in plain sight? Well, someone did. Word travels fast in a city under siege. Someone saw the unfamiliar men enter Rahab's home, and a report was sent straight to the king of Jericho. Soon the heavy knock of soldiers echoed at her door. This was it. This was the moment the entire mission could have ended in disaster. Rahab faced a terrifying choice: obey her king and surrender the men, saving her own skin, or risk absolute ruin for two foreign strangers. With the king's men at the door demanding she bring out the spies, Rahab made a choice that would change history. She had already hidden the men on her roof, burying them beneath bundles of flax she had laid out to dry. Facing the guards, she lied with astonishing calm. Yes, the men were here, she admitted, but they left at dusk, just as the city gates were closing. If you hurry, you might catch them. It was a brilliant deception. The soldiers, buying her story completely, rushed out into the night on a wild goose chase. With the immediate danger gone, Rahab went to the roof to talk to the men she had just saved. And it's here, in a secret meeting under the stars, that she reveals her true motive. This wasn't just a random act of kindness, it was a profound act of faith. She hadn't saved them because she was a traitor to her city. She saved them because she had become a believer. I know the Lord has given you this land, she confessed, her voice a mix of terror and awe. She told them that all of Jericho was paralyzed with fear. They had all heard the stories how the Israelite God had parted the Red Sea 40 years earlier, and how they had recently obliterated the armies of powerful Amorite kings. To Rahab, these weren't just rumors, they were proof. In a stunning declaration that stands as one of the most powerful confessions of faith in the Old Testament, this Canaanite woman, a pagan prostitute, looked at these two spies and declared, "For the Lord your God is the supreme God of the heavens above and the earth below." She understood something that even many in Israel struggled to grasp. The God of this wandering nation was the one true God of all creation. And in that moment of clarity, she saw her one chance. Hiding them wasn't just an act of mercy, it was a calculated step of allegiance. She was switching sides in a cosmic war, and she had to secure her family's future. Now then, she pleaded, "Please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you." She wasn't just asking for a favor, she was demanding a sacred binding oath. She was negotiating the terms of her salvation. In exchange for their lives, they would spare hers and the lives of her father, mother, brothers, sisters, everyone she loved. The spies agreed. The promise was made. But they needed a signal, a way for the invading army to identify her home in the chaos of battle. They gave her a single object, a scarlet cord. "When we come into the land," they instructed, "you shall tie this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and anyone who is inside your house will be safe." This was a secret promise, a covenant sealed not in a temple, but on a prostitute's rooftop, marked by a simple crimson rope. Rahab then lowered the men down from her window outside the city walls, and they escaped into the hills, carrying not just vital intelligence, but the weight of the oath that would decide a family's fate. After 3 days in hiding, the spies made it back to Joshua. Their report confirmed everything Rahab had said. "The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands," they declared. "All the people are melting in fear because of us." The secret mission was a resounding success. The stage was now set for one of the strangest and most miraculous sieges in military history. God's battle plan for Joshua was, to put it mildly, unconventional. No siege towers, no battering rams. Instead, the instructions were for a parade. For 6 days, the Israelite army was to march around the city once a day in complete silence. Leading this bizarre procession were 7 priests carrying trumpets made from ram's horns, followed by other priests carrying the sacred Ark of the Covenant, the physical symbol of God's presence with his people. Can you imagine the psychological effect on the people inside Jericho? Day after day, they watched from their impenetrable walls as this silent, relentless army just circled their city. The only sound was the shuffling of thousands of feet and the eerie blast of the horns. The tension inside Jericho must have been unbearable, a slow building dread of the inevitable. And inside her house on the wall, Rahab watched and waited, the scarlet cord a silent prayer hanging in her window. Then came the 7th day. This time the Israelites circled the city not once, but 7 times. As the seventh circuit ended, Joshua gave the command. The priests unleashed a long, powerful blast from their trumpets. Then Joshua turned to the people and roared, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." A tremendous shout erupted from the entire Israelite army. And in that instant, the impossible happened. The Bible says the walls just collapsed. Archaeological findings suggest this may have been a divinely timed earthquake. Evidence shows the mud brick walls toppled outwards, forming a natural ramp for the army to charge straight into the city. The city was plunged into chaos and destruction as the Israelites followed the divine command for judgment. But in the middle of all that turmoil, Joshua remembered the oath. He turned to the 2 spies, the men who made the secret promise, and gave them a direct order: "Go into the prostitute's house and bring her out and all who belong to her, in accordance with your oath to her." The spies raced through the ruined city until they found the one landmark that mattered: a house, miraculously still standing on the remnants of the wall, with a scarlet cord hanging from its window. They entered and brought Rahab out, along with her father, mother, and all of her relatives, leading them to safety. While an entire city was wiped from existence, one family was saved. The promise, whispered in secret on a rooftop, had been honored in the sight of all. But Rahab's story doesn't end there. She wasn't just spared, she was welcomed. She and her family were brought into the nation of Israel. The prostitute from Jericho, the pagan outsider, became one of them. But her legacy goes so much deeper, stretching across centuries and culminating in the most astonishing way imaginable. Tradition tells us this woman, once defined by her past, went on to marry an Israelite man named Salmon, who some believe was one of the very spies she saved. Together they had a son named Boaz. That's right, that Boaz, the one who would marry Ruth, another foreign woman brought into Israel by faith. Their son Obed became the father of Jesse, who was the father of the great King David. And then, centuries later, when the Gospel of Matthew was written, the author carefully listed the genealogy of Jesus Christ, tracing his royal lineage back through David and Abraham. And in that sacred list, right there among patriarchs and kings, Matthew includes the name of Rahab, the woman from the walls of Jericho, the prostitute saved by a secret promise, was a direct ancestor of the Messiah. Her story is held up in the New Testament as a towering example of faith in action. The book of Hebrews lists her in its hall of faith alongside Abraham and Moses, saying, "By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient." Her faith wasn't just a feeling, it was a deep conviction that led her to risk her own life for a God she had only heard about. The story of Jericho is so much more than a tale of falling walls. It's the story of how a single act of desperate faith, a secret promise whispered on a rooftop, and a scarlet cord hanging in a window could rewrite a family's destiny and weave an outcast into the very fabric of salvation history. It proves that God's plan is never limited by our past, our status, or our reputation. In fact, He seems to delight in using the most unlikely people in the most unexpected ways to accomplish His will, showing that no one is beyond the reach of His redemptive promise. If this story inspired you, subscribe for more stories of faith and courage that change the world.